let's review a demo using Amazon S3. Okay, we're back into the console, and from here you can see that I could either use the shortcut bar that I created, or I could use my history, or down here in storage. So there's a lot of places where I could find, what I'm looking for. So either way, let's go ahead and go over to S3. Now S3 is an interesting one, and I want to point out the difference between S3 and something like EC2. With EC2 being a regional service, we have to choose the region. But with S3, even though the bucket itself, if we were to create a bucket, that bucket would reside in a particular region. But in other ways, S3 is also considered a global service. From a DNS perspective, S3 is global. Now, from the dashboard perspective, S3 is global. You'll see here that now that we're into S3, it says that S3 does not require a region selection. It's global from the perspective of the dashboard. But if you notice down here, each of these buckets, you'll see I have a couple of dozen different buckets or so for various purposes, and a lot of them are in different regions. I have some buckets in Ohio, some in Oregon, some in Virginia, and you can see that some of these were created automatically for me by CloudFormation. Others were created for me by Elastic Beanstalk. And then I have some personal projects down here at the bottom. And you'll notice here that some of them contain this orange icon that says public. That's to help alert us to the fact that there are some type of permissions in that bucket that is enabling that bucket to be publicly readable. And that's a really important thing to be aware of. A number of organizations over the past few years have gotten themselves into trouble because they, in some way, created or made this bucket publicly readable even when they were storing sensitive information inside of it, right? And so now Amazon is working to try to draw your attention to the fact that you may have made a bucket publicly readable without realizing it, right? So keep in mind that a bucket, once we create an S3 bucket, by default, it is private until we make it otherwise. You can see here, like I said, I have a number of different buckets. Let's just take a look at the details of one. We can look at the cerulean.systems bucket, and one, it has a name. Cerulean.systems is the name of the bucket. And I chose that name because that is the domain name. I have configured this bucket to host a static website. And the cerulean.systems static website is just a one-page website. And of course, I still have some other files to put in here, but there's an index, and there's going to be a number of other files available. And so you can see that from here, I could upload files. So from there, I could just, if I have my Finder or Explorer open, I can drag and drop files. I can select the files. And from there, then I can set the permissions of those files, properties of those files, and allow them to be uploaded. From here, I have a number of other things that I could do. I could select different objects and download them. All right, so let's look at the properties of this bucket. From here, I could turn on versioning if I wanted to. Versioning allows us to store multiple versions of an object. So every time I upload a new version of index.html, if I turn version on, the S3 would automatically store a version so that if I wanted to roll back to a previous version, I could do that. Versioning is one way of helping to prevent accidental deletion or overwriting. So if something were accidentally deleted or overwritten, we could just go back to the previous version. I could also turn on server access logging, which gives us Apache-style access logs. And here you can see that I have enabled static website hosting. I'm going to go ahead and click on that, and you can see it says, yes, I do want to use this bucket to host a website. And as a result, I get a DNS endpoint specific for hosting a website. And so you can see, in order for my domain name, powered by Route 53, to be mapped to this bucket powering the website, the name of the bucket has to match the name of the domain, right? In this case, cerulean.systems. And then, of course, I can specify the index document, error document. I can also specify redirection rules. If I want certain URIs to be redirected somewhere else, I can add that here. All right. So if I make changes to that, then I can just hit save. I could also go here to turn on default encryption. Right now, there is no default encryption, but if I wanted to, by choosing one of these options, I could ensure that everything uploaded to this bucket would automatically receive server-side encryption. Down here, I could also select tags. I could enable transfer acceleration. Transfer acceleration is really helpful when you're uploading or downloading objects to or from S3, and especially over long distances. The longer the distance, the more benefit you get from transfer acceleration. I could enable events. Events are really helpful when dealing with something like Lambda. So events, I could say, you know what, I want to receive a notification when new items are uploaded to this bucket, and I want that notification to trigger something like Lambda and have Lambda execute code in response to the uploading or deletion or modification of data. So we can go over to the Permissions tab and see that if I scroll down here, I've given public access. Let's just take a look here. I've created a bucket policy. If we take a look at the bucket policy, you can see very similar to identity and access management policies for users. This is what we're looking at here is an example of what we call a resource-based policy. This is a policy that exists on the resource, and what I'm saying here is that I'm allowing anyone and everyone, including anonymous users, including members of the public that do not have AWS credentials, to perform the S3 get object action. That is to say that I'm allowing them to download objects from this bucket from anywhere in this bucket. So the resource here, you'll notice here the / is essentially saying from anywhere in the bucket. Now you'll notice that I'm not granting the general public the ability to list. I'm not granting the ability to upload or delete. So the general public is not allowed to write to this bucket. They're not allowed to discover items in this bucket. But if they do have the URL for an object in the bucket, this permission would allow them to download that, right? And as a result, because of this line here, this line saying that anonymous users is why it's highlighted as being public. We could also specify CORS configuration. For anyone who might not be familiar with that, CORS, cross-origin resource sharing, is a way of allowing AJAX applications or single-page web applications to perform AJAX requests to this domain. All right, we could go to the Management tab, and from here, we could take a look at lifecycle rules. Lifecycle rules would allow data to be automatically transitioned from S3 to Glacier, or to be permanently deleted after some period of time. We could enable cross-region replication. Now, if I had data that was very important to me, or data that needed to be used by EC2 in another region, then I could enable cross-region replication. And by doing that, I would specify another bucket in another region, and any changes I made to this bucket would be reflected in that second bucket. I could also turn on analytics and have S3 automatically analyze a number of the S3 usage. We also have metrics showing me the size of the bucket, the number of objects, the number of requests, bandwidth, data transfer, and so on. And then, of course, we also have inventory. And I have not enabled inventory, but inventory can be really useful to ensure that the data in the bucket is accounted for and that it hasn't been changed or altered. All right? So again, S3 is pretty straightforward. We create a bucket, and then we upload objects to that bucket. And S3 is a really powerful central place where we can store vast amounts of data and make that data then available to other systems or the internet as a whole. For static web content, for logs, for data lakes where we want to then process that data in Amazon EMR or Kinesis or Redshift or so on. So that is our demo for Amazon S3.